In the headlines, a big victory for the Republicans in the U.S. midterm elections, giving the GOP full control of Congress. Investors are turning bearish on Korea, citing slow recovery both in exports and domestic demand. The KOSPI gave up close to 4% so far this year, bucking the region's upward trend. And the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says he hopes to work with China in getting North Korea to realize that denuclearization is the only way to bring security and prosperity. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the program. Coming to you live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. We're seeing more bearish calls on the Korean markets these days. It could be names like Samsung Electronics with its poor third quarter results creating a ripple effect. And some say the impacts are likely to carry well over into next year. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
One by one, local securities firms are lowering their projections for Korean shares next year, citing a lack of growth momentum in the domestic economy. Kyobo Securities Company points to a faster-than-expected slump in exports as one of the main reasons, citing an earnings shock from Samsung Electronics. The Korean tech giant posted $3.8 billion of profit in the third quarter, down 60% from the same period last year.
There is no growth engine to supplement the low earnings performance of Samsung Electronics. The country's automobile sector isn't likely to improve anytime soon, either due to low global demand, and this will spill over to Korean shares next year.
Another analyst from Uri Investment and Securities projects that the country's shares will drop during the latter half of next year after experiencing a boost in the first half.
It's going to take up to 2 quarters for the stock market to reflect Seoul's expansionary monetary policies, including the Bank of Korea's cuts on the country's main benchmark interest rate. But it's going to be a different story in the latter half of 2015, mainly due to low domestic demand.
Projections for this year's main benchmark KOSPI aren't all that bright either, as the gap between Korean shares and global shares are widening. The KOSPI fell nearly 4% from the start of the year, the steepest drop among Asian countries. In contrast, the Dow Jones reached an all-time high, rising nearly 5% over the same period, while Japan's Nikkei inched up 3.5% on the back of Tokyo's expansionary monetary policies. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Korea's foreign currency reserves dropped for the third straight month in October. This downward streak is a first since the 2008 global financial crisis. The Bank of Korea says that the country's foreign currency reserves amounted to $363.7 billion as of the end of October, down $680 million from the previous month. The central bank attributed the decline to the weakening euro and British pound against the greenback. Bilateral trade volume between South Korea and Japan has been shrinking for nearly 3 years now. It could be the weak yen factor, but as our Song Ji-sun reports, exchange rates haven't been the only reason behind the lagging trade.
The weak Japanese yen is taking a toll on bilateral trade between Korea and Japan. According to the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, exports and imports to and from Japan have been on a steady decline since 2012, as with the third quarter of this year. It marks the first time that bilateral trade between Seoul and Tokyo has posted negative growth for 3 consecutive years. For Tokyo, the weak yen reduces the need to import Korean-made goods, which have in turn lost their price competitiveness. Added to that is the low domestic sentiment here in Seoul that has led companies to reduce their facilities investment, with imports of machinery and industrial electronics products from Japan dropping more than 20% this year. Tokyo's increased foreign direct investment in Seoul also plays a role in the reduction of imports. Japanese companies account for 28% of all foreign companies in Korea, the highest portion for any country. Besides the weak yen, bilateral tensions between Seoul and Tokyo over historical and territorial issues are also hindering trade. Japan is Korea's third largest trade partner after China and the United States, at a trade volume of $95 billion last year. 송지선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, the won-to-yen exchange rate may be causing headaches for Korea's exporters, but there is one industry that's enjoying this opposite experience. Hanatour, one of Korea's biggest traveling agencies, saw its number of Korean tourists to Japan jump over 120% in October on year. Interpark, another travel agency, saw its customers to Japan soar nearly 200% during the same period. Travel to Japan had been on a downward spiral following the Fukushima nuclear disaster back in 2011, but analysts say the weak yen has driven the recent surge in demand. Korea is known for its chaebols, or large conglomerates that dominate the domestic economy, but that leaves little room for new startups to flourish. And that's shown in a new report that says more than half of newly established companies were new affiliates of these chaebols. Connie Kim tells us more.
The playing field for Korean businesses has gotten steeper over the past decade, with the big getting bigger and fewer firms finding their footing. Among Korea's largest 500 companies, management evaluation firm CEO Score says the number of companies who have been in operation for less than 20 years has dropped over the past 10 years from nearly 200 in 2004 to 164 as of last month. Look a little closer and the problem becomes even more apparent, as 63% of the newly established companies were spearheaded by conglomerates.
Over the past decade, more conglomerate affiliates have been created compared to startups, and the environment that nurtures new businesses so they can start from scratch has deteriorated.
While conglomerates were branching out with their affiliates, only 19 of the 500 largest companies in Korea began as startups. The IT sector made up a large portion of that figure, topped by the internet portal site Naver and gaming development company NCSoft. In the short term, CEO Score forecasts a tough road ahead for the establishment of new companies, citing the sluggish domestic economy.
The Park Geun-hye administration is trying to create favorable business conditions for new businesses, but I think it's more important for conglomerates to provide a solid ground for startups to establish themselves.
While smaller companies are trying to make inroads, the Korean economy continues to be dominated by long-running giants such as Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, and Hyundai Heavy Industries, companies that have been operating for more than 4 decades. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
The profitability gap between Samsung Electronics and Apple continues to widen, with Apple's third-quarter profit margin standing almost 4 times larger than that of Samsung Electronics. The Korean tech giant recorded an operating profit margin of 7% in the July to September period. That's far below Apple's 27%. And this means Samsung gains $7 in profit out of every $100 worth of products sold, while Apple gets $27. LG Electronics and Google have signed a cross-licensing agreement that will give both companies access to each other's patents. The deal will include existing patents as well as ones that are registered up until the year 2023. Through the agreement, LG will gain access to Google's software patents such as data processing and information security, while Google gets the right to use LG's hardware devices. The two companies say the deal will boost their relationship and allow them to focus more on developing products and services together.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chery for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. U.S. top diplomat John Kerry has once again asked for China's help in getting North Korea to give up its nuclear program, saying support is not only wanted but necessary. Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says he hopes to work closely with China to make North Korea realize that its current path only leads to a dead end. In a speech at Johns Hopkins University on Tuesday, Kerry said North Korea will only realize security and prosperity when it gives up its nuclear program. The U.S. diplomat also stressed the importance of cooperation with China on non-proliferation. Last week, Kerry praised Beijing for putting pressure on the North by putting limitations on trade going into the country. China is North Korea's last remaining major ally and a key provider of food and fuel supplies. Kerry is scheduled to visit China this week for a range of multi- and bilateral meetings, a week ahead of President Barack Obama's visit to Beijing for the APEC Leaders Summit. Kerry's comments come as North Korea ruled out holding talks with the United States regarding either its human rights or nuclear issues. A spokesperson from the North's Foreign Ministry said Tuesday, Pyongyang would not discuss such topics with enemies that aim to topple the regime, adding it's only willing to speak with countries that respect its sovereign rights. Watchers say the official statement linking human rights and nuclear issues could be an attempt to influence Washington ahead of a possible UN General Assembly vote on a resolution against North Korea's human rights abuses. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
The White House says President Barack Obama will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping when he visits Beijing next week for the APEC summit. At the center of the discussion will be how to shape the new model of relations between the two superpowers and how to deal with North Korea's nuclear threat. Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
In their first major meeting since the Sunnyland summit in June last year, Presidents Barack Obama and Xi Jinping are expected to try and answer a tough question. What will the relationship of their nations look like in the future? The White House says Obama will hold bilateral talks with his Chinese counterpart next Wednesday in Beijing on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. President Xi wants a new model of great power relations in which Beijing will have a bigger say in the region. China has been taking strides by escalating maritime confrontations, launching new diplomatic initiatives like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and toughening its position on issues like cybersecurity. While Washington has resisted such ambitions, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry stressed the importance of getting the relationship right.
The U.S.-China relationship is the most consequential in the world today, period. And it will do much to determine the shape of the 21st century. That means that we have to get it right.
The two leaders will also discuss regional and global issues ranging from North Korea's nuclear program, the Ebola outbreak, pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, and China's territorial dispute with Japan in the South China Sea. President Obama's six-day, three-nation trip also takes him to Burma and Australia. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
And over on Korea's political front, pension reform was the hot topic on the last day of a legislative questioning session at the National Assembly today. But if the opposition party is going to go along with the ruling party's plan to overhaul the system, of course it wants something in return. Kim Myung-gil tells us more.
The pension reform plan for civil servants was the session's most debated issue, with the ruling Henry Party and the government pushing to pass the bill by year-end.
If we don't reform the pension program, the government will record a pension deficit of some $9.2 billion each year, which will be a disaster for our future generations and create a national burden. We ask for the cooperation of civil servants.
However, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is backing away from the proposed plan, saying social consensus must be reached at a national level. Political analysts say the two parties may be gearing up for under-the-table deals, as the opposition side is demanding a parliamentary probe into the four major rivers project. The controversial $20 billion project launched under the previous Lee Myung-bak administration has been a focus of concern for the opposition party, as well as environmental activists who believe it has harmed the river's ecosystem.
3 out of 4 people are calling for a parliamentary probe into the 4 major rivers project. The probe is aimed at digging up how taxpayer money was used. There is no reason for the rival parties to quarrel over the issue.
Last month, the two parties reached a last-minute deal on the contentious Seoul ferry bill, breaking months of political deadlock which logjammed key bills in parliament. As the governing Saenuri party is eager to keep the legislative momentum going, pundits say it is likely that they will seek negotiations with the opposition and make concessions in order to quickly pass the pension bill. 김영길, ARIRANG News.
Korea and Qatar have agreed to jointly pursue a coal thermal power plant construction project in southern Turkey. Following the two countries' leaders' summit in Seoul on this Wednesday, Seoul and Doha signed an MOU to take part in the $14 billion plant construction project. By combining Korea's advanced technology with Qatar's experienced capital management, the two sides are seeking to win similar infrastructure construction bids in more countries. President Park then sought Doha's support for Korean firms to win orders ahead of the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. She also promoted Korea's Northeast Asian Oil Hub initiative and then asked Qatar and other oil-producing countries to participate. An ancient Korean shipwreck dating back 100 years has been discovered in the West Sea. The National Research Institute of Maritime Cultural Heritage says the 11-meter-long ship was found off the coast of Chungcheongnam-do Province. Over 100 white porcelain wares were found in the vessel. Experts believe they date back to the late 18th to early 19th century. It's the first Joseon Dynasty ship to be discovered in Korean waters. In the U.S., a major political power shift is taking place. The Republican Party has scored significant victories in the highly contested midterm election, capturing the majority in both the House as well as the Senate. To tell us more, Paul Lee is joining us from the News Center. Paul, this was a widely expected win for the party. Many Republicans unseated their Democratic rivals, not only in the Senate, but also in the governor races as well.
That's right. It marks the first time the GOP has taken charge in both chambers of Congress since elections back in 2006. And it's definitely going to pose an uphill battle for President Barack Obama during his remaining 2 years in office. It's also a sign that the American public is unhappy with his administration's performance, worried about the sluggish economy, and wary of the partisan gridlock in Washington. Our Connie Lee has more.
It's a big win for Republicans. They now have full control of the U.S. Congress.
And I just want to tell you right now that with your help and God's will, we will change the direction of our country.
Seen as a referendum on President Barack Obama, Tuesday's midterm elections brought out the voters who are unhappy about the current administration and the political gridlock in Washington. Republicans maintained their majority in the House and gained control of the Senate by picking up at least 6 seats in tight races all across America. The GOP sweep first started with Shelley Moore Capito, who won in West Virginia.
We were one of the first states to send a message to President Obama tonight that this president's agenda just isn't working for West Virginia.
Another winner was Republican leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who was re-elected. Seen here casting his vote earlier in the day, McConnell is now set to become the Senate's majority leader. Analysts had been predicting a Republican victory as President Obama's approval ratings have hit their lowest levels since his inauguration. According to the latest Gallup poll, Obama's approval rating stands at just 42%, with 53% disapproving of his job as president. When the Republicans officially take over the Senate in January, it will be a tough final 2 years for the Obama administration. As of now, it's silence from the White House. But President Obama is set to make a public statement on Wednesday. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And turning to Eastern Europe, the head of NATO says Russian troops have moved closer to the border with Ukraine in the latest act of brinkmanship for the territory. We've seen a lot of military activity in this region, Paul. So what's the current assessment by NATO?
Well, NATO and its Western allies believe these latest moves by Moscow are a show of strength as it continues to back the separatist movement. Tensions have escalated following Sunday's election in rebel-held areas, a vote that Kiev has condemned as illegal and a violation of its sovereignty. Speaking in Brussels on Tuesday, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg accused Russia of violating the peace agreement it signed with Ukraine in September. Moscow's foreign ministry denies any military involvement, despite Western officials citing overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
Recently, we have also seen Russian troops moving closer to the border with Ukraine, and Russia continues to support the separatists by training them, by providing equipment, and supporting them also by having special forces, Russian special forces inside the eastern parts of Ukraine.
Earlier on Sunday, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko declared newly formed army units would be sent to defend key eastern cities in the event of a possible rebel offensive. He said the move was part of a broader plan to end the drawn-out war, which has killed more than 4,000 people this year.
And shifting to the latest in international business, we've been talking a lot about the weak yen, and Toyota Motor has raised its profit forecast for this year on the back of the weaker yen story. Paul, car makers and other manufacturers in Japan are cashing in on this currency environment, and Toyota is obviously using it to their advantage.
That's right. The world's biggest automaker has been successful in capitalizing on the sharp decline in the yen, as well as solid overseas sales, in order to offset sluggish earnings at home. Toyota said Wednesday that it now expects the company's operating profit to reach nearly $22 billion by the end of next March, up about 9% on year. The growth forecast has prompted analysts to update Toyota's shares to a buy ranking for investors, but some warn that the future remains uncertain.
Outlook is somewhat different because of slowed demand in Japan, and we continue to have a tax problem, and also competition in China is getting much keener, and also we are observing slowdown in Europe, particularly Russia, South America, and also Southeast Asia.
Despite the record quarterly earnings, experts say that the weak yen will only give a temporary boost to Toyota and other Japanese automakers amid tough competition from China. They say a pickup in domestic demand and prolonged economic recovery in Japan will be the key to unlocking long-term stability.
And finally, ending on a lighter note, shall we? The American artist Beyonce has been named the highest paid woman in the music industry for 2014. Beyonce is just coming away from her very highly successful and very profitable world tour. So let's talk in numbers, shall we? How much did she pull in this year?
Well, according to Forbes magazine, Beyonce earned up to $115 million as of this past June, and that's more than double her reported earnings from the previous year. Forbes on Tuesday ranked the 33-year-old at the top of the list of female entertainers in the music business based on record sales, concert tickets, and lucrative endorsement deals. Next on the list was pop icon Taylor Swift, who jumped one spot from last year to number 2 with earnings of $64 million. Singer Pink came in at third place with $52 million, climbing up the ranks by 5 spots on year. Madonna, who is 56, failed to make the top 10 this year after shooting to first place in 2013. Chery?
All right, thank you so much, Paul, for those numbers there. They're just sort of beyond my world. Anyways, thank you so much, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
Hello everyone, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the weather updates. So it was a typical late autumn day here in Korea, and clouds are now slowly moving in over some regions. At the moment, a dry weather watch is in effect here in Seoul as well as other regions. As for tomorrow, the 10-degree gap in numbers between the days and nights will continue. Also, showers are in store along the eastern coast. About 5 to 10 millimeters will drop there tomorrow and on Friday, and Jeju towards the end of the week, and overall late autumn conditions should continue for most regions. Here are the readings for tomorrow. Seoul and Gwangju reach 18, Daegu and Busan 20. On to other regions. Jeju hits 18 while Mount Kumgang drops below 0 in the morning. Those are the updates we're following at this hour. I'll be back with more after 10.
See you then, Bo-kyung, and that wraps up this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.